This probably should have been the very first video I ever made for BookTube, but hey, here we are, and I'm excited to tell you now what my top 10 favorite books of all time is, and be able to come back and see if that changes throughout the year. It's already changed this year enough, and so I'm just kind of excited to jump in. So welcome to the channel, my name is Graham, and let's just go ahead and get started with some honorable mentions. It's really hard making a top 10 list, but these two books I'm going to mention right now are very close, but they don't really quite fit into the category. One of them is because I haven't read it in a very long time, and that one is Ender's Game by Orsen Scott Card. It is a sci-fi novel, and I haven't read it since high school, but I remember that was really the first sci-fi book that really sucked me in to that genre, and I just have really fond memories about it, where I'm kind of not wanting to go back and read it right now because I'm afraid I'll be like, this is bad. So that one's up there. I didn't want to put it on my top 10 list because I haven't read it in a long time, but also it's just really good memories. So if you haven't read Ender's Game, go check that out. Second is a collection of short stories, and it's one that I read just a few years ago, but it's How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. And this is a story that's just amazing. All the stories are linked together. It starts off with a father finding out his daughter died in Antarctica because she uncovered a corpse that had this old plague in it, and that plague then goes across the entire world, creates a pandemic, and only affects children. And so kids begin to die, and the world is trying to, solve that pandemic. And it's really sad. It's a very emotional read, but every single story made me cry in real ways, and it was really, really well written and really, really good. And you could listen to that on Audible as well, because that was great on there too. So those are my two honorable mentions: a collection of short stories, and of course a book I haven't read in a very long time. But let's jump in. This is in no particular order. Talked about this a little bit on my channel when I first introduced myself, and it was Damnation Springs by Ash Davidson. This is Ash Davidson's only novel, and it's literary fiction. So this book just hit me emotionally and at the right time. This is based in the 80s over in the Redwood Forest in Northern California, and this story is about the logging company that's there, and also about the chemicals that they use to be able to tear down the trees in those forests. You follow an entire family that's in this small town there. One of them is a logger, and he climbs the trees, and the wife is a housemaid or somebody that helps with childbirth, and she's seeing effects of these chemicals, and he's going out and just doing his job, where he ends up buying this plot of land because he wants to make his family, more money. And it's just this heartbreaking story that's really, really good and written really, really well. It was like watching a drama television show where everything was explained in such a way where it was like the pine cone fell and created just certain atmospheric things led to huge story. And it was really good. And I remember just the drama was so real in it. I was jumping out of my chair. I read the ending and I was crying severely, where when my wife came home to check on me, I literally was just she thought I got injured, and it was just a crazy time. So Damnation Springs by Ash Davidson's not for the faint of heart. There is so much stuff that goes in there. But man, it was a very enjoyable read, and it's the book I lend out the most, and so go check it out if you haven't already. It's really, really good, and I don't feel like anyone really talks about it, and it just affected me really, really well. And so that stays on my list until maybe I reread it. We'll see, but that one's really, really good. The next one is one I read this year. I'm kind of including series in here because it's kind of hard to pin down one book, but I would say the Greenbone Saga is something that can make it here by Fonda. And out of all the books, I would say Jade Legacy is my favorite out of the three, so that would be the ones on my list. And man, her story writing is amazing. I'm sure you've heard through Fantasy BookTube that the Greenbone Saga is incredible and all about it, but pretty much there's this family called the Call family, and they are on this small island called Janloon, where Jade is their main export. And so they get to kind of control the Jade there, and this Jade, the reason it's so popular is it gives people these abilities. There's people that gain more power of enhanced speed, enhanced strength, senses, being able to do all that type of fantasy type stuff. And there's some people that aren't affected by it either. They're called Stone Eyes. But this follows the Call family, who's this huge organization that's protecting the Jade here. And there is a clan that's outside of that that's called the Mountain Clan. So you have the No Peak Clan with the Calls, you have the Mountain Clan, and there's just clan wars going on. And so it's like this weird family against family of power and control of the Jade and the city, and it's very political. But the reason the series got so far was because not only is there so much action and stuff in it, but the politics is just phenomenal. I have never felt so tense just hearing dialogue back and forth of two people in a political room. And then you also see the chess pieces moving. You get to follow this family. You're in different perspectives of Hilo and his sister, and you get to see them make these huge plays that are just going to affect later on in time. And you think, man, I wish I would be able to see that later in time. And you do! Jade Legacy literally is like the things you see them do power plays for in Jade City all of a sudden matter so much in Jade Legacy, and it's incredible. So it's a great story, and the politics is amazing, and it's just well put together, and you get to see those pieces and people grow up, and man, I love it. Next up is another one of my favorite books. I actually have a tattoo of it, and that is the Mistborn trilogy, the Era 1 one. So my favorite out of those is actually going to be The Well of Ascension, and it's similar to the Greenbone Saga or Jade City and Jade Legacy is because the politics in this book. Pretty much, Brandon Sanderson says himself is he wanted to write a story of where the bad guys pretty much win in Star Wars, essentially. Like, the Empire wins. So what happens is you have the Rebellion be able to try to do that. This is when the Rebellion takes control and they don't know how or why the Empire wanted the power in the first place, essentially. And the politics and story in this one is crazy. On top of Brandon Sanderson's magic system is incredible. This series has something called allomancy in it, and pretty much people ingest metal, and it gives them certain powers. Mistborns can control all the metals, but there's certain people that are born with just one of them. So for example, this tattoo here, I don't know if you can see it very well, but this is the symbol for zinc, and zinc riots people emotions. So I think of myself as a writer. I'm someone who can be able to evoke emotion as I talk to them, or, you know, be able to tell good stories out loud. And so that is why I chose that tattoo, but there's people that have that power, and so they would eat zinc and be able to emit that power of making people feel passionate and move towards things. Very scary power if you think about it, because they can kind of persuade you to do certain things, make you feel passion towards something. And so yeah, it's a really awesome magic system on top of just great politics and great characters. My favorite character in Mistborn Era 1 is Eland. He's amazing. He is this person that doesn't really have powers. He's like a noble in this family who's just kind of like, I don't really want to be here. And then something happens in book 2 where all of a sudden he's like the only one that knows politics enough to really kind of be the face of the organization. And it's super fun to be able to kind of learn from him and see his growth in the entire series. When there's like some beginning chapters in Hero of Ages where you're like, oh my gosh, Eland's amazing. And so highly recommend it for my boy Eland. It's awesome. Mistborn is up there. Number 7, I would have to say, is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I've talked about this series a lot. Again, I have another tattoo of a bear, but Beartown is right here. This is book 1. It's really hard to talk about without spoiling it. So pretty much this is about a small town in Sweden called Beartown, and they're all about hockey. They're surrounded by this hockey club. And the main character that you follow is somebody who is in charge of it. I think his name is Peter. It's been a minute, but Peter, he is in charge of the hockey club, and he used to be an NHL player, and so his job is to really take care of it. And the junior hockey team is doing awesome. But then this crazy event happens with one of the players. Their star player messes up in a very big way that impacts Peter's daughter and Peter's family as a whole. And you get to see the town descend in this way that just is written so well. This book is written in so many different perspectives. You get a small character story in a chapter, and yet you learn so much and feel so much for that character, and that's just Fredrik Backman's superpower. So this series, if you want to, you know, cry a little or just be emotionally attached to a town and be like, we are the Bears of Beartown all the time, it's really, really good. And it's a literary fiction novel, so you don't have to worry about fantasy or superpowers or anything like that, but it is just, the characters are just top notch and just really, really good. So this is in my top 10 for sure. And the whole series is great, but this one obviously started it all and was the best one of the bunch in my opinion. And I love it. So check out Beartown by Fredrik Backman. It's incredible and really, really good. Oh man, this is my last tattoo I have on my arm, I promise. But I love The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. The Poppy War is incredible. It's a really good series and one of the first ones I picked up. I picked up Mistborn pretty early on to read fantasy lately, and then soon after it was The Poppy War, because The Poppy War's cover is really, really beautiful, or the books are. When you go shopping in the fantasy section and you see this orange book, you're like, man, I need to get this, and every single one is a different color. I have a firm belief that The Poppy War should be read at schools, and I believe I've said that once or twice, but this book reads like a YA novel. It's very easy to consume, and it almost feels like a Harry Potter type story. You follow Rin, this girl who's growing up in a terrible situation. Like, her family's in this like smallish town. She needs to get high marks to go to a prestigious school to be able to learn how to, you know, fight, be in like this military type school. And so she gets high marks and goes and leaves this like opioid addiction type place and goes there, and you kind of get that whole school vibe. She gets in a few fights. She's not really well accepted, all that type of stuff. She's learning about powers, things of that nature. And then when you're like, cool, this is going to be a really cool dark academia type story. You have fun teachers that you love. All of a sudden, halfway through, war happens. And it's like hardcore war where it's like, oh no, is my main character going to die? Friends of hers are dying. Things are going through that are just like insane. You're like, what is going on? And then she's just going through war and she doesn't know where her friends are, and you discover that through it, and it's talking about the hardships. Really, really, oh, it's so good. Now also, this is based in China and based in, you know, a lot of actual history of the wars were used to write this book that happened there. And so I believe it was like World War II around that time is like kind of what happened was going on in China during this book. And so you're getting like real life war descriptions that's just insane and hard to read, but yet palatable because it's fantasy, and it just does everything well. Does everything well and has a really great message. And so that's why I think it should be read by almost everybody. It should be read by kids in high school for sure. And obviously check the warnings. I say that, and it might not be the best for everybody, but it just shows war in this like non-beautiful way, like celebratory way that we all know and love. It just shows war in a devastating way, and I think that's really important to understand and grasp. So may not be the best choice for that, but in my opinion, I think this is like super well done, where it feels very folklore and fantasy while showing that hardship, and done very well. R.F. Kuang, fantastic. So that is another one of my books in the last poppy flower tattoo I have. And moving on. The other one is similar vein. It's called The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. The way I explain it is like Avatar: The Last Airbender, but for adults. And so you are following the Water Tribe, essentially, an airbender. And they are on this small island, kind of secluded. And they don't really know a lot of the world until something happens. And you're following one of the young boys that's going to school there. And he realizes maybe he's not getting all the information of the world that he should be. He has full faith in his emperor and the person that tells them what's going on. But then something happened that makes it go like, huh, maybe I don't know what's going on. And it starts this whole thing. And again, war happens. You kind of go through family. Family's a huge thing. With you follow the same child's mom, and it's heartbreaking. It's so good. I devoured this book. It's like 800 pages, maybe almost 1,000, and I read it in like 2 days because it was so good and so impactful. And so I highly recommend checking out The Sword of Kaigen. It's really, really good, especially if you like that Avatar: The Last Airbender type stuff, because it's great. There's sword fights, there's just magic going on, and it's good. So this one I also just mentioned, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Oh my gosh. It's a rewriting of the Iliad by Homer. Oh, it's so good. It's really, really good. It's obviously about Achilles, and it's also about, I can never say his name, so I'm just gonna write it here. It's these two people, and it is a story about them being together and being soldiers together, and ended up falling in love together. It's a love story. It's a rewriting. It's incredible. I love this book. And the thing that makes it even better is Madeline Miller's prose are just art pieces. And yeah, you probably are hearing a crying baby. My son is still awake, but don't worry, my wife is with him. So there you go. But Madeline Miller's prose are just impeccable. And I read this out loud to my family when Finn was younger and he was breastfeeding. I would read books out loud to my wife, and it was just an experience, and it was awesome, and it was great. Love this book. Check it out. It's incredible. You don't want to miss it. And it's a standalone, so you don't have a whole series behind it either. This one is Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. This is another fantasy or magical realism type book. This is my favorite of like T.J. Klune's like newer novels. They all kind of have a certain vibe to them. They're all an LGBT romance novel essentially, but they aren't spicy. They're very like, it's like a long romance where eventually like you're like, oh yay, they fell in love essentially type stuff. But this one follows a lawyer named Wallace, I believe his name is. It's been a minute since I was in the book, but you follow a lawyer who dies. He ends up having a heart attack and becoming a ghost. And the Grim Reaper comes for him, but the Grim Reaper is just like a normal person and is like, hey, come on, let's go. And takes him to a tea shop where he meets someone by the name of Hugo. Hugo is a middleman, and he helps people pass over and cross over by giving them tea, talking to them, but it's until they're ready. And so Wallace, through this entire time, is just, oh, I don't want to leave, or I haven't learned my lesson yet, and he doesn't go. And he's this person that no one liked. There was no one in his life that really liked him at all. He was a workaholic, all this type of stuff. And so you see this growth of this character as he is chilling in this tea house waiting to pass over. It's funny, it's charming, it makes you laugh. It's really, really well written, and the characters are really well done. There's some cool little creatures as well. Like there is a like spirit deer or elk that shows up. That's really, really cool. There's funny like bits of YouTuber there that's like this paranormal activity person. There's so much charm in this book with so few characters. T.J. Klune's other books have a lot of zany characters, but this one is really, really focused on both Hugo and Wallace, and there's just a few more in between, and it's just so good. This is my favorite of them, and I just love it. It just warms. It's a cozy, good read, and just so good. I even play Dungeons and Dragons as well, and I took Hugo pretty much and was like, I need him in my game, and so I have this like tea person that's just so good. So I really love it. Really good writing. Check it out as well. We have another Brandon Sanderson. I promised I wouldn't do too much Brandon Sanderson. I've read a lot of Brandon Sanderson's books, and I realized that I love all of them. And so I kept it to 2. I didn't want to make my whole list Cosmere. But this one is the Stormlight Archive, and it's The Way of Kings. The Way of Kings, in my opinion, is the best Stormlight Archive book. This book is daunting, first off. It's over 1,000 pages. It's thick. My friends were like, you need to read this. And I was like, yeah, well, let me read Mistborn first, and then I'll see if I want to get into it. And well, I did that, and it is phenomenal. I'm so glad I did. There's multiple points of view in this story. My favorite character is Dalinar. He's this kind of somebody who had a dark past and now is like this righteous guy, essentially. He's more of this person of order and someone who needs to follow the rules. And he's this general of these armies that's going on, and you're in this world that has storms that are just coming in with these militaries going out collecting these giant like shards of like these like stuff to make armor and swords and all this type of stuff. And it's really cool. And Dalinar is somebody who's just stalwart and following the rules, but you also follow this other character named Kaladin. The Way of King really focuses on Kaladin, who is this person who was a soldier who also loves rules, but the military failed him, and that person who failed him as well. And so you have this clash where all of a sudden Kaladin's like this prisoner of war fighting in Dalinar's armies, essentially. And there's just a point in the book where they both meet, and man, that payoff was huge. That's near the end, and I was just struck so hard with that scene involving the shard blade that Dalinar has, and just Adolin's there too, which is Dalinar's son, and Kaladin, and just, it's called the tower scene. It just, It's so good. It hit me with all the emotions and it was just incredible. And I don't know if I'll be able to find that feeling again. It was so good. And I'm so excited to read it again. I'll probably be jumping back into them through audiobook at least before this new book comes out, because it's just so good. So yeah, I love The Way of Kings. That's up there. This last one, again, this was in any order. This would probably be near the bottom of the list, but we'll say it's the last one, which is cool. This is Exile by R.A. Salvadore. It is book 2 in like the Dark Elf trilogy, but Exile is, oh, so good. The characters in this is really, really well. As I mentioned before, I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan. I have another tattoo of it. I have a Tiamat tattoo right here with a 20-sided dice. I'm planning on getting tattoos of just Dungeons and Dragons here. But this is based in the Forgotten Realms, which is the Dungeons and Dragons like world. And you follow this dark elf named Drizzt, and he escapes his home world. That's what the first book kind of takes place. But the second book is where he's leaving the Underdark because these dark elves live underground. And he runs into a man named Belwer Disengulp. And man, Belwer Disengulp is incredible. He is this little dark gnome who has like a pickaxe for a hand and can listen to the stones. They talk to him, and so he always says Maga Kamara, dark elf, which means by the stones, dark elf. And it's incredible because they go through this like whole adventure, and there's like these D&D monsters that come out, and it's written so good. I love their friendship. I think it's great. I wish that Belwar was in more of the books because he was just my favorite character out of all of them. But it was just so good, and I just love going through these like dark tunnels and seeing the monsters and having these fights. The way I explain like Dritzt's novels in general is they're kind of like the Fast and Furious of fantasy, I guess you could say. Not, it's like kind of about family, like, oh yeah, but they're more like when you watch those movies, you're not there for a deep story. You're there for the action and the craziness of that action, and these books have that. They're just nuts. Like, the way they're explained is really well done and really, really fun, and you're just going through and doing that, but yet you're also learning about the relationships, which is great. So those are my top 10 books, right? There's a lot to choose from. A lot of them are fantasy. There's a few literary fictions in there, but these ones mean a lot to me right now, and I'm excited to see how this list change. Have you read all of them? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I'm glad I was able to finally do this video. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day and happy reading. Go out there and find your favorite books, and we'll see you next time. Toodles.